It was October 3rd, 1849, when a man was found wandering the streets of Baltimore. He was delirious, dressed in filthy, ill-fitting clothes that weren't his own. His name was Edgar Allan Poe. The man who once wrote tales of madness and death had become one himself. Slumped outside Ryan's tavern, Poe was barely conscious. Passers-by thought he was just another drunk. But something was off, deeply off. He wasn't just incoherent, he was terrified. He kept repeating a single name, Reynolds. Who was Reynolds? Why was Poe dressed like a beggar when he had left town looking sharp and sober? Where had he been for the last 5 days? These questions have haunted historians for more than a century, because by October 7th, Poe was dead, and the cause of death remains one of America's greatest literary mysteries. There was no autopsy, no death certificate, just vague mentions of congestion of the brain. Even stranger, the hospital he died in was little more than a poorhouse. Why would one of the most famous writers in the country be left to die alone in such a place? His fiancée wasn't notified. His friends were never called. The man who gave us The Raven and The Telltale Heart died in an ending that felt like one of his own stories, disjointed, chilling, unresolved. They say history repeats itself, but what about the parts we forgot? Welcome to Echoes of History, the channel where we dig up the dusty corners of the past to uncover the weird, the wild, and the wait, what? Stories they didn't teach you in school. Grab your curiosity and maybe a cup of tea, because what you're about to hear might just change how you see the world. But let's go back to the last time Poe was seen alive and well. It was late September 1849. Poe had left Richmond, Virginia, on his way to Philadelphia. He was to edit a new poetry collection for a friend. He told his fiancée, Elmira Shelton, he'd be back in a few days. He never returned. Somewhere between Richmond and Philadelphia, something went terribly wrong. Poe never made it to his destination. Instead, he vanished. For nearly a week, no one knew where he was. And then he reappeared barely alive and coherent in another man's clothes. A man who once obsessed over the line between reason and madness was now lost within it. Witnesses said he looked exhausted, battered, and afraid. The clothes were ragged and didn't fit his slender frame. They seemed like the type a drunkard or dock worker might wear. But Poe didn't drink anymore, at least. Not recently. His friends insisted he had sobered up. Some claimed he couldn't even handle alcohol, just one drink could leave him disoriented. Others argued he had enemies, people who resented his work or owed him money. But there was no robbery, no sign of injury. Just a man broken and fading. When Poe was taken to Washington College Hospital, doctors were puzzled. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he was lucid. Most of the time, he wasn't. He called for someone named Reynolds again and again, but no one knew who Reynolds was. He never explained, and no record of the name was ever found in his life. In his final moments, Poe was reportedly terrified of being left alone. His hands trembled. He clung to the doctors and begged them to stay. His final words, "Lord, help my poor soul," and then silence. Poe died on October 7, 1849. He was just 40 years old, and the world was left with a mystery that echoed louder than any poem. Newspapers at the time offered few clues. Some blamed alcohol, others whispered about suicide, but those closest to him disagreed. They said he had everything to live for. He was about to remarry, restart his career, and publish new work. One theory, however, stood out, a dark one. A theory that Poe had become the victim of a violent political scheme. It was called cooping, a practice so corrupt it feels unreal today. But in 19th century America, it was terrifyingly real. Political gangs would kidnap unsuspecting men, drug them, and force them to vote multiple times. They'd dress them in disguises and move them from polling station to polling station. Poe was found on election day in clothes that weren't his, outside a tavern used as a voting location. Could he have been cooped, drugged, beaten, and dumped after being exploited by a political machine? It would explain the strange clothes, the delirium, the lost time. It might even explain Reynolds, a handler, perhaps, or someone he tried to resist. But the truth remains elusive. No one knows exactly what happened during those missing days. No diary, no letters, no eyewitness testimony, only shadows and theories, and the echo of Poe's terrified voice, whispering a name that no one could place. Whatever happened in Baltimore, it silenced one of literature's most haunting voices. But some say Poe's death was just the final chapter in a life marked by tragedy. An orphan, a failed soldier, a struggling editor, a genius doomed by the very darkness he wrote about, yet the world never forgot. Poe's tales still live on, whispering from dusty bookshelves and midnight readings. His death may be a mystery, but his legacy is undeniable. In Part 2, we dive deeper into the cooping theory. We'll examine the political climate, the gangs, and the cover-ups. And we'll ask, was Poe's mind taken by madness or by men? The truth may still be waiting, hidden in archives, or buried beneath the floorboards of history. The date was October 3, 1849. A man named Joseph Walker, a compositor for the Baltimore Sun, noticed something strange. On the steps of Gunner's Hall, a polling station. A man lay slumped in distress. He was disheveled, barely coherent, and dressed in clothes that didn't belong to him. His name, when asked, came out in a broken whisper: Edgar Allan Poe. Poe had vanished days earlier on his way from Richmond to New York. No one knew why he was in Baltimore. No one knew where he had been, and no one knew how he ended up like this. He was rushed to Washington College Hospital. For 4 days, he drifted in and out of consciousness. He spoke nonsense, quoted scripture, and called out for someone named Reynolds. Nurses described him as agitated, fearful, and hallucinating. He was never fully lucid, and he never explained what had happened. On October 7, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe died. He was only 40 years old. The official cause of death, listed simply as congestion of the brain, but what does that even mean? In the 19th century, it could imply alcohol poisoning, stroke, or trauma. And Poe's history with alcohol was no secret. He had battled addiction throughout his adult life. Some thought it was just another tragic relapse, but others weren't so sure. Poe had reportedly joined a temperance movement shortly before his death. He had been sober for months. Even friends insisted he wouldn't have willingly relapsed. Was it possible he had been poisoned, drugged, or worse, used as a pawn in a political scheme? Baltimore was notorious for a practice called cooping during elections. Gangs would abduct vagrants or travelers. They'd be drugged, disguised, and forced to vote repeatedly for a candidate, often under different names and outfits, gunners. Hall, the very place Poe was found, was a known Cooper's site. Was Poe a victim of voter fraud? Thuggery. His clothes didn't fit. They were cheap, worn, and not his own. He had no luggage, no money, no identification, and no clear reason to be in that part of Baltimore. The Reynolds he cried out for was never identified. Some believe it was a hallucinated figure. Others think it might have been Jeremiah Reynolds, an explorer Poe admired, or perhaps someone from his final, lost hours. Medical records of his death were never preserved, nor was a full autopsy conducted. His attending physician, Dr. John Moran, offered contradictory accounts over the years. Moran's retellings became increasingly dramatic. He claimed Poe's last words were poetic, even spiritual. "Lord, help my poor soul," he reportedly said, but historians debate whether Moran embellished these moments, perhaps to elevate Poe's final hours, or perhaps to hide something more disturbing. There were whispers of foul play, that Poe had been targeted, that his political writings angered powerful figures, that someone had wanted him silenced, yet no solid evidence ever emerged. His funeral was shockingly small. Only 7 people attended. A simple grave was dug. No eulogy, no grand procession, just rain, silence, and the shadow of mystery. In the months after, speculation only grew. A rival writer, Rufus Griswold, published a damning obituary, calling Poe a drunk, a madman, and a liar. Griswold claimed to be Poe's literary executor, though he wasn't. His biography smeared Poe's reputation for decades, and ironically, it helped solidify Poe's myth. The image of a cursed, tormented genius took hold. But what if the truth was simpler and sadder? That Poe died alone and confused, the victim of neglect. That bureaucracy and indifference buried his truth, or worse, that someone deliberately erased the evidence. Today, Poe's cause of death remains officially unknown. Over the years, theories have piled up like layers of Gothic fiction. Rabies, syphilis, diabetes, epilepsy, heart failure, even carbon monoxide poisoning. But none have been conclusively proven. The medical science of the time was limited, and his death recorded just a single line, as if history, too, wanted to forget. But the mystery clings to him like fog in a graveyard. We still want answers. We still want closure. But maybe Poe would have liked it this way. A man whose life was a mystery, and whose death became his final, unsolvable story. He left his questions without endings, footsteps without a trail. Like the characters in his tales trapped between shadow and meaning, a writer who became his own riddle, not just in fiction, but in fate. The day after Poe's death, the newspapers buzzed with half-truths and speculation. Some called him a drunkard, others mourned a literary genius lost too soon. Rufus Wilmot Griswold, a rival, and one-time friend, published a scathing obituary. Under a pseudonym, he painted Poe as a mad, drunken misanthrope. It was a character assassination that stuck for decades. Ironically, Griswold became Poe's literary executor. He edited Poe's collected works, infusing them with lies that would shape the public's image of Poe for generations. The official cause of death on the certificate was vague. Congestion of the brain. Some took it as a euphemism for alcohol poisoning. But was it really that simple? Medical records from the time are incomplete. There's no surviving autopsy report. Poe was buried quickly in a modest grave. But the questions never went away, and neither did the contradictions. Witnesses said Poe was known to avoid hard liquor in the months before his death. He reportedly became violently ill after even a single glass. Friends said he was sober, committed to turning his life around. That made the alcohol death narrative seem shaky. So alternative theories flourished, some plausible, others surreal. One of the most discussed, Poe was a victim of cooping. Cooping was a form of voter fraud used by political gangs. Victims were kidnapped, drugged or beaten, and forced to vote repeatedly, often in disguises, often intoxicated. Election day in Baltimore, October 3rd, was the day Poe was found. It fits the timeline. The neighborhood he was found in was notorious for cooping operations. Some accounts even claim Poe was wearing mismatched clothing, perhaps outfits from multiple false identities. Could Poe have been a random victim of a corrupt system? Or was it more personal? Another theory posits poisoning by enemies, jealous rivals, or jilted lovers. Poe had made enemies in the literary world. His scathing reviews earned him plenty of grudges. Then there's the theory of rabies. A 1996 analysis by Dr. R. Michael Benitez found Poe's symptoms consistent with it: delirium, disorientation, aversion to water. It was a compelling diagnosis, albeit speculative. No known bite was ever documented, but it added another strange possibility to the mix. Still others point to brain tumors. In 1875, Poe's body was moved to a new grave. Witnesses claimed his skull was oddly small, possibly degraded, but a strange mass was reportedly rattling inside. Some thought it was a calcified brain tumor, but no scientific analysis was ever done. Poe's final days remain sealed in fog. His last coherent words, unknown. His final message, lost. His last known utterance, "Lord, help my poor soul," was whispered hours before death. It offers no answers, only more sadness. He was buried in Westminster Hall Cemetery, beneath a simple stone. Years later, a grander monument was erected, but the mystery lay undisturbed beneath. The curious came often historians, fans, conspiracy theorists. Many left poems, coins, or notes on his grave, as if trying to reach across time. From 1949 to 2009, an anonymous figure visited Poe's grave every January 19th. The Poe toaster left roses and cognac, a quiet, poetic ritual fit for Poe himself. But even that mystery ended in 2010. The visit stopped. The silence was as chilling as Poe's untold truths. His works remain iconic: The Raven, The Telltale Heart, Annabel Lee, stories of madness, grief, and shadow, written by a man who may have lived them more closely than we knew. And yet, despite all his literary insight, Poe left no memoirs, no diary of his final hours, no farewell to his readers. He died alone, confused, in a hospital that no longer stands. The world moved on, but the questions never did. Was he a victim of a system that saw him as disposable, or of a conspiracy no one dared expose? Or did fate simply break a fragile genius? The death of Edgar Allan Poe was not a climax, it was a cliffhanger, a riddle without a punchline, a mystery only he could have written, and he never got the chance. In his tales, truth is elusive, horror intimate, and madness ever so close. So, perhaps it's fitting that his end mirrored his stories. A man swallowed by the same darkness he gave words to. And still we wonder, still we ask, still we search for meaning in the snowflake shadows of Baltimore. Maybe that's the final twist Poe left us. That some tales should never have endings, only echoes. In rain-soaked graveyards, in flickering candlelight, in the turn of a yellowing page, Poe speaks still. Not in answers, but in questions. The man who made death poetic died in prose no one could finish. And the pen he once wielded so fiercely was silenced too soon. But maybe that's where the story begins. In wondering what really happened, and realizing some mysteries are meant to haunt us. That's it for today's Forgotten Tale. If this story made you raise an eyebrow, or don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that dusty little bell so you never miss another echo from the past. Drop it in the comments, we're always listening for new echoes. Got a weird bit of history you think we should cover? Until next time, keep your curiosity loud and your history weird. That's it for today's Forgotten Tale. If this story made you